Welcome, everyone. I'm Phoebe Morad. I get to be Executive Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation. And tonight we're going to dive into material that I really don't know what to say about. So I'm really grateful that we always offer other people's advice and perspectives, because this is a territory of energy and specificity and logistics that I don't know how to navigate. So we have a few people on here that have had experiences navigating in their own way, in their own context. And so I'm really grateful to hear from them. But as we get settled, we like to open up with we call it a knowledge acknowledgement, because it is essentially, for one thing, acknowledging the fact that we're all from very many different places. You're standing on very many different lands right now, which is great to see. But also we like to acknowledge the fact that Lutherans were not the first to try to restore creation. So as we live, work, and worship in the land that is now called the United States, Lutherans Restoring Creation recognizes that we do so on land that was stolen from Indigenous peoples. As we are called to restore creation, we are also called to restore right relationship with one another. As we join in this holy vocation of loving our neighbor, we honor all our Indigenous siblings who have been companions of the lands, waters, and beings of Turtle Island since time immemorial. We charge our community to learn about the original and continuous stewards of the land upon which we exist. We lament legacies of violence, cultural genocide, and displacement of Indigenous communities, committing ourselves to hearing and speaking the truth of that history and its ongoing effects. May we gather faithfully in mind, body, and spirit, so that we may mend what has been broken and embody Christ's gospel of abundant life. Amen and welcome. And with that being said, too, we usually have Gabrielle Earl here with us. And right now they are actually at a town meeting where the particular area where they live out near Tacoma, Washington State, the Puyallup people are trying to be erased, apparently. So I want to send, as a group, her good intentions and send them all light in what they're doing right now. And with that, I would like to hand over again and welcoming people that are here. And I know that there might be other people in the room that have more to say as far as their experiences. We are going to start off first with Marilyn, because I got to meet her a long time ago. She was one of those people on your list of people that you reach out to saying, I heard that someone was interested in creation care and I just can't find them. And it took several emails and calls, because Marilyn, I'll send a link to her official bio, but one of those people that's everybody wants to talk to and is doing a little bit of everything. But Marilyn gratefully has decided to join our board in the past few months. So I'm really grateful that Marilyn has joined our board, but I'm also really grateful for the work and life experience that you've done getting here, so that you have a lot to share with us. And you've had a journey in your synod, I'm sure in your personal life too, but in your synod in particular, about energy stewardship that I would love it if you could share with the rest of us. Over to you, Marilyn.
Sure. It started when several people had reached out to our bishop about wanting to have some way of connecting with other folks who had creation care concerns. And they were starting to form these affinity groups, among the far-flung congregations in the synod around different topics. And so this became one. So I ended up co-chairing it with Pastor Jim Steinkatz. So we have this, group that meets mostly online, very rarely, and so on. But as we were meeting and just getting a sense of our priorities, one of the first things they wanted to do was kind of make a real visible, request or impact of the synod by offering a resolution at our synod assembly that very summer, just a few months after we actually got together. And so we came up with a resolution that was asking the synod, just the office building, the Lutheran Center, as it's called, in Cuyahoga Falls, to reduce its carbon footprint over a period of time, matching the climate care statement that the ELCA had just approved. So by 50%, I think it was, within I think 2030, something like that. So we made that, we offered that resolution quite late in the assembly process. So we had not had time to cost it out first, which is one of the things that you technically need to do when you make, a resolution like that. So it was tabled, and they asked us to do the research about what that was going to cost the synod to make that kind of a commitment. And we had been given some information from one local congregation who I think had worked, Justin can back me up on this. I think they had done an audit with Energility congregation in Bay Village. So they had some experience with the process and had put us in touch with Energility, and we started the process of having Energility audit the energy use at the Lutheran Center so that we could get a sense of what it was going to take to get it down to 50%. And Justin will explain later, they have a two-phase process. So there's the first phase is free, and it's kind of a preliminary assessment of what the big issues are going to be. And then you commit a fee that shows your good intentions, and you're operating in good faith, and they will do a much more in-depth analysis of the facilities. So we got that initial one, and then it's all very slow moving because you have to wait for approval from the Synod Council, which meets 4 times a year. We went back to the Synod Council with that first assessment, and they agreed to invest in the second phase, which was big because I don't know what all synods are represented here, but ours is financially struggling. And so, any unplanned cost is unwanted. But we did have a congregation who contributed part of the funds, part of the fee as well. The Energility came back with a really cool proposal that we all fell in love with and dreamt of using, but the synod ultimately was not able to commit to that expense. So what we had to go back to the assembly with was, we affirm the intentions of the ELCA church-wide statement and so on, and the Lutheran Center in Cuyahoga Falls is going to continue doing what they have been doing already. They had taken a number of steps, like changing lights and starting to seal doorways and so on, that had already greatly reduced their energy use. They committed to continuing to do that, and there was a list of sort of more or less easy, kind of inexpensive maintenance steps that Energility had suggested, in addition to the bigger project, which was solar panels and to make us energy neutral. And so they're working on those steps now. And the committee that had formed to do this was basically the same as the affinity group, but we are compiling resources for other churches, for congregations to use if they want to pursue this themselves. We're trying to set up a website page where they can get links to grants and other sources of funding and so on. So we're trying to just keep it moving so that it's always in everybody's consciousness. But that's, don't know how much you want me to say, but that's in a nutshell.
That was very well done in a nutshell. I'm hopeful that you all are thinking of questions as well, and you can put them in the chat with a Q at the beginning so we remember to go back to them. But just for the sake of the whole arc of the story, since Justin was referred to in here, I think it makes sense, Justin, to kind of say what happened from your perspective in this story to then expand on what you do with Energility. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I was going to say it's one of those things you're amongst friends when there's not a rehearsed um, speaking arrangement, and it was kind of pulled together through some connections that connected us, and I guess maybe even starting at the the first point of the story, the congregation in Bay Village. I know Alicia Ashburn has had some connections there,
Right, right.
and we had also went through that similar process with them where we did a really low cost, high touch, real simple walkthrough, got them to understand and ask a few questions. Interestingly, at their church, they actually looked around um, after that level one walkthrough and realized that they had a volunteer that owned a heating and cooling company, and his company would come from time to time, change filters, do some, kind of band-aids and bubble gum, keep it running type of thing. But they realized that, oh gosh, pretty soon, we're not going to know what to do when the boilers fail. And sure enough, they started to. So we were able to help them with a. We did a lot of work with houses of worship in the state of Ohio with the Columbia Gas program to get high efficiency heating systems and do work with the rebate programs. And so Alicia's become somebody that I'm fond of. Don't see her nearly as much as I used to, but she had connected us through. We were doing a lot of work with a group called Ohio Interfaith Power and Light that has since shifted their gears to do some more community focused work rather than with individual congregations. So um, Reverend Marilyn and I got connected, through a couple, and I think Pastor Jim Steingass, we had also done a similar level one walkthrough with him, gosh, probably 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Might have even been pre-pandemic, and so I knew that we had some familiarity there. So I'm excited to hear your excitement, because when we did the work there at the synod, it was about taking those steps, and I have a one pager. I don't know, Phoebe, if I can share screen. It wouldn't let me
Oh,
share
sure.
earlier.
And you're going to be co-host, so who knows what else you can do.
Oh boy,
I know.
we're all gonna
Don't let the power go to your head.
But I just kind of acknowledging, your kind words there, but also the fact that you thought it was cool and it was fun. Um, one of the things that we do a little differently than your traditional, and admittedly, I'm not an engineer. I just work with really smart ones, and I've worked around them for a number of years running a big building. So when I started my own company with a co-founder a little over a decade ago, we just had our 10th birthday a couple months ago. Um, he's not only a professional engineer, but he is an Episcopal deacon, and so we both had an affinity for small businesses, nonprofits, and folks that can't otherwise afford larger technical services. So one of the things that we've strived to do with doing energy audits is they mean different things to different people. And whether it's somebody that's annoying and has nefarious reasons to call you on the telephone to try to get your energy bill so they can get you a contract or do something maybe less than savory, or it's gosh, this is engineering stuff that's going to cost way too much and it's way too expensive. We try to be the folks that talk to people, not at them, and work with them, not work in other means. So what we've done is carved out a nice little um, business doing energy audits, where about half of our work is for nonprofits and houses of worship. And so, kind of when we do that work, I'm going to share a screen. We start to think about getting people involved. And I think that was one of the interesting things that you shared there, Marilyn, was that getting people involved is really a key part of the process. And maybe our adventure is going to be, it's not going to let me share.
Oh,
Not
I
because
did.
of yours,
No.
not because of yours, but
Do
because of my.
you want to try
Here we go.
emailing? Okay.
Here we go. I don't have anything to hide, so I'm just going to show the whole darn screen. Um, this is one of the things that when we do
Still
an
don't
energy
see
audit,
anything. I don't see anything.
can you.
Not yet. Does everybody else see something? Because I don't. Okay. No. Okay. Is it the second click that's getting you? I know I always.
Yeah, that's right. I'll circulate it for everybody's reference
Okay. Okay.
afterwards. But it's just kind of a one pager that kind of talks about a couple of topics that I'll touch on before I hand it back. Part of
Your
the,
link is live. The link you put in the chat calls up Energility.
okay.
Yeah, I put that in there. So I hope that's okay, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Good. Good.
Yeah, when we do energy audits, we have a 90-second video on our screen that kind of talks about some of those kind of steps 1, 2, and 3. And the point being, it doesn't have to be an expensive engineering endeavor. Engineering, kind of scares people a little bit. Some folks, my wife who's probably listening downstairs, she does our marketing, and she doesn't like me to show our presentation slide that says we do math, because nobody wants to talk about math. But energy audits are about getting, doing the math to understand the math and science of when you take an action. You know, it isn't just turning all the lights off in the room and you got to sit in the dark. It's doing stuff smartly, but also with with intentionality. So you can do simple things like walking through. One of the simple things we recommend congregations do is, hey, if you have somebody that lives close to the church, drive by after the cleaning staff's been there, or hey, drive by, once or twice a week. Are there lights left on at nighttime? Gosh, that's something that's kind of common sense, but not everybody does that. So it can be really simple things. And then it can be getting into energy studies where you're doing engineering work, and in order to keep our engineers and our consultants, fed and keep their mortgages paid, we don't have any shame in taking a fee for that. But the other thing we do and have done pretty well is worked within the state of Ohio, finding a number of different resources, whether it's the Department of Development. Um, there are many, almost every county in the state of Ohio has an economic development person, and they're there to create economic growth, but they're also there to support the community. And what we've found is a lot of the public agencies and officials, as much as they want money going through their coffers and through their communities, they also want good stories, and they want to be helpful to nonprofit organizations and folks that are also caring for the community. So they're really good resources to have, and get to know those folks. The other part, that Marilyn mentioned was about people, and we've developed a nice relationship with an organization in Ohio called Faith Communities Go Green, and I think that's important because, like when I mentioned to you, Phoebe, about is this just a Lutheran focused event? You were like, oh gosh, share it far and wide, or with whomever. This is not a Lutheran message, right? This is a creation message, a caring message, and one that is should be widely spread. So Faith Communities Go Green is primarily in the 10 county region around southwestern Ohio, but one of the things they've done pretty nicely is carved out um, a nice operation where they are ecumenical, and they do spread across multiple faiths, and they really look at it as a extending the community beyond just the greater Cincinnati area, beyond even the 10 county region, because they have resources and tools that they share. And one of the things that we did with, do you need to interrupt something? Okay. Um, One of the things that we did for years with Ohio Interfaith Power and Light, and still do with the houses of worship that are our clients, and when we get, at one point, the state of Ohio, the Department of Development said, in the office, we refer to you guys as the church people. Is if somebody calls the Department of Development and says, hey, we're looking to get assistance with something, if it's a house of worship, most of the time they'll say, hey, call these folks. They do a lot of work with houses of worship. But part of that is getting the people involved. And so, whether it is starting up green teams or getting people to uh, have those kind of, collaborative conversations, the level one walkthrough that we mentioned, the level one energy audit, it's pretty much that. It's a walk and talk. It's, hey, let's talk at the table for a few minutes and understand the lay of the land, and understand, what's going on with the building and what the problems are. But let's walk around and talk about what's going on here. So it isn't just me speaking at you, but it's pointing and showing, and it's, hey, why is this, that, or hey, you're doing. And the other thing is, it's not about highlighting all the bad stuff. It's also amplifying, hey, I see plastic piping coming off of this furnace. Well, that means it's high efficiency furnace. Well, hey, whoever made that choice, did that, good thing in mind earlier. And so with green teams, Faith Communities Go Green has actually hired us, and we're getting ready to embark on another adventure with them here in the near future, is where we've done a session, what we call train the trainer. and they got a bunch of volunteers together that said, hey, we'd like to help. We don't want to call Energility from Columbus every time we need to do a walkthrough. We'd like to empower people in our area to do that. So we put on 2 or 3 sessions. I think it was 2 in person and 1 virtual, where we just kind of taught some of the basics of looking at a utility bill and how do you disseminate, where the rate is and what my trends are and how much is going to my heating and cooling and how much is going to my lighting. How do you just see some of that in a simple manner from the utility bill? So it's about getting people involved, but then also training them and empowering them so they can do the level 1 walkthrough, and we can spend 30 minutes giving them feedback on it. And then they can take some of those low cost actions right away without having the delay of we got to have a committee meeting and we got to do a report presentation and then yada, yada, yada. And then, I guess the last thing that I'll just highlight is, it's about meeting people where they're at. So even though it is a technical service that we provide, we've dealt with a number of folks that are retired volunteers and school teachers that, want to have a conversation with you, and 50% of it's about the building and 50% of it's about what's going on in the community. And we've had physics professors review our reports, and they want to have a totally different conversation. We had a pastor one time, we had an 80-page report, and we got done with the executive summary after 30 minutes. And he looked around the room. He's like, okay, let's go on page 2. And literally, he wanted us to go through page by page. I read the room and said, gosh, half these people are nodding off. So we got really quick and really creative with some of our succinct statements. But again, that's about meeting people with where they're at. So, whether it's the follow-up calls that the Synod had with us on a couple of occasions to answer questions about the report and break it down a little bit farther, or whether it was, following up with emails to see if there's ways that we can support. It's about meeting people where they're at. And, people are the center point of, why we're trying to do this work, but then also it's about who we work with too. So that's me, I guess.
And Justin, just to clarify too, how many places like Energility are there right now? What's your scope of work, and how wide of a net do you cast?
Well, so I always tell folks we're Central Ohio based and Ohio focused.
Mhm.
However, we've developed some really nice relationships that when we can have an experience like this where we can collaborate, and especially we were doing remote thing. Again, my co-founding partner Craig, when we started the company 10 years ago, we did a lot of stuff online and remotely because he wanted to retire at some point in the future. So we've been doing this type of conversation and collaboration. We can travel for our clients, and we've done work in Indianapolis, we've done work in multiple states. We typically are Ohio focused, but primarily now post pandemic, it's pretty commonplace to do these type of virtual conversations. So what I would simply say is if we can have a connection, whether it's a phone call or a video call, we don't charge anything for an initial consult. And whether that's to ask a couple questions, you put our website in there. We have what would be back in the day was considered a blog. We do what we call a tips post, and it's anywhere from 2 to 3 days a week. We'll put a tips post out there where it gets shared on LinkedIn, Facebook page, and it's on our website. And it's really, again, my wife does a lot of our marketing. So the stuff that looks really smart, it's coming from her. And usually
And you're totally saying that because she's in the next room, but okay. No.
I tell people that far and wide because actually some people will compliment us about, man, you're really good on LinkedIn, or you have really good message.
And it's her.
Well, she's very much the down to earth, like, don't give me garbage, don't give me engineer stuff. Like, talk to me like it's my house, or what are things that people can share. So I would say, it's just about having that connection, and
So on the spectrum of what you offer too is anything from follow us to get all of those kind of tips and constant feed and fertilization of information, to working together in a contract. And speaking of which, I know that everybody in Maryland alluded to this too, as to how little money a lot of synods have. And there are a lot of churches out there that really only want to know about energy savings so that they can save money, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to ask Ken to speak next, because Ken's experience lifts up some really good history with a certain way of at least a synod being able to help fund some of these things and ideas. Are you ready to go on, Ken? And then I know that questions will be as well, and we'll
Sure.
open it up.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I'm based in Metro Chicago. I have been part of our Synod's Environmental Concerns Working Group since it was created in 1993. And we have had a no interest energy revolving loan fund in the Synod since 94. We got a $5,000 seed grant from the National Church Office, and we've been slowly but surely building up capital in our fund. We've got $61,000 worth of capital in our fund, and we've done 34 projects across the Synod, including our outdoor ministry center, which technically is outside of our geographic area, but they were interested, and they are supported by Metro Chicago Synod as well as the two downstate synods. We've been blessed to have an energy auditor on our committee since the very beginning. We had, in the early days, we had one person, and for about the last 25 years, we've had a guy named Mike Stanch, who's a professional in the energy field. He's still part of the committee, even though he now lives in suburban Minneapolis, which tells you a little bit about his commitment to our cause. What we tell congregations, if they are interested, is that the start of the process is for them to do an audit. Now, they can contract with Mike, and most do, but that is not a prerequisite for getting involved. And what we want in that audit, we've been primarily focused on lighting, because most of the projects we've done, they've ranged from $5,000 to $22,000 in loan size. And as most energy professionals will tell you, an older building presents lighting as the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. Case in point, exit signs. They're on all the time. If there's an incandescent bulb in that exit sign and you replace it with an LED, you're probably going to have about a 95% energy savings. So, I mean, and those are the kinds of opportunities we want congregations to look at. Many, of course, would love to see us be able to replace their HVAC or reglaze the building or insulate the building. We would love to do that. We don't have the capital to do that. At any given time, we typically have 3 or 4 loans out being repaid, and the repayment period has ranged anywhere from 3 to 6 years. And it's based on the anticipated savings. We want these projects to be a no out-of-pocket cost to the congregations. In fact, if a congregation does an audit and then decides to proceed with a project using Synod resources, we will offer them the opportunity to fold the cost of the audit into the loan. So in that case, it's truly no out-of-pocket cost. In our early days, we would do the audits at no charge, and we discovered that people didn't give it much credence if they didn't have any chips in the pot. So we want them to commit to pay for an audit, and then, as I say, if they decide to go forward, they can fold the cost of the audit into the loan. But if we were to just continue doing audits at no charge, we were fearful that we would continue to see people saying, well, we didn't pay anything for that. We don't really need to pay attention to what it's saying. We've had involvement now in 3 solar projects, rooftop solar projects at Grace Lutheran in Oak Park, Our Savior's Lutheran in Arlington Heights, which is my home congregation, and Grace Lutheran Church Good Shepherd in Oak Park, and Grace Lutheran in Libertyville. And that's the church I grew up in. So, and I'll give you a little overview of the solar project we did at my congregation. We've long had a green team. We've long had an interest in walking the talk on creation stewardship. And so there was a lot of excitement about the possibility of doing a solar project. We went out for bids, got 4 responsive bidders, selected a winning bidder. And then that firm not only provided the equipment and the installation, but they also worked with the state of Illinois and our local utilities on applying for rebates, on applying for the state energy, renewable energy credits, which were critical to the economics of the project. Our project, we ended up with 276 solar panels on our roof. So it's a fairly large campus, and we have solar panels on most of the flat surfaces of the roof. Capital cost of that with installation was about $180,000. So we presented that to the congregation at a congregational meeting, along with information from our vendors. We had involvement from our finance committee, our green team, our property committee. If there hadn't been unanimity amongst those parties, the project probably would not have proceeded. And I will say that for all the projects we've worked on, if there's no champion, it doesn't happen. You may have a whole committee of champions, but there has to be leadership around trying to make that any energy improvement project happen. In the case of Our Saviors, I said $180,000 cost of the project. We did a one-time fundraiser and got $90,000 in contributions from the congregation. Said, you want to buy a panel? You want to buy a part of a panel? Here's your opportunity to put your checkbook where your mouth is. And that was a huge benefit to us because it gave us the wherewithal to proceed. Much of the rest of the money was borrowed internally. We had some designated funds that were not being used that we could borrow against, and then we would pay those back as the savings accrued. The Synod Loan Fund made a $20,000 loan, and it was originally, the project had a 7-year payback. And then COVID hit. And the building had almost no usage, but the sun kept shining. So much of our production was sold back to the grid, our utility grid, and we paid off the project in 3.5 years. And now it's just producing kilowatts. Sunny days, even cloudy days will generate some power. And then, of course, we have to buy power at nighttime and on days when the skies are too dark to give us much in the way of electrical production. So that's the story of Our Savior's solar project. As I say, most of the projects we've done with our revolving loan fund have been lighting. And we've our I should tell a little bit about how we managed to accumulate capital in our loan fund, because you can have a terrific idea, but if you don't have money to make it happen, it doesn't happen. We got an initial $5,000 grant from the ELCA. This is back when we actually had Dr. Joe Ebenezer on the national church staff. He was an engineering professor from New Mexico who was involved in promoting creation care as a national ministry of the church in the early days following the creation of the ELCA. We went to the fraternals, now Thrivent, formerly Lutheran Brotherhood, and Aid Association for Lutherans. Got a little bit of money there. We got a fair amount of money because the synod had a group purchasing arrangement for natural gas with a company you may have heard of, Enron. And while they ultimately became notorious, we saved some money, and our committee went to the synod office and said that money could just go into the general synod coffers, or it could go to help build energy stewardship. And the bishop at the time and the synod council at the time said, yeah, that makes sense. There's a nexus there. So we got about $13,000 worth of Enron rebates that helped capitalize our fund. And then we got about a $50,000 grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. And 30K of that went to capitalize our fund, and about 20,000 went for outreach. This was in the around the 2003 timeframe. And we had a list of people waiting for money. You know, we had more potential congregations interested in the fund than we had money to make loans, and that helped tell this statewide foundation that we were ready to actually put their money to use immediately. And we went back to them the next year and said, look at all the great things we did with your money. And they said, we already gave Lutherans money. We're not going to honor your grant application for year 2. And they're still in existence as an organization, but they don't do those kinds of grants anymore. So much as we thought that would be a recurring source of episodic funding, it turned out to be a one-time shot in the arm. What we ask the congregations to do is look at their utility bills for a year prior to feed into the energy loan. And then we ask them to provide us with their utility bills after the project's been implemented. And that is an opportunity for us to do some data analysis. We did talk, I want to say this was maybe about 10, 12 years ago, with the National Church Office about trying to replicate this program nationally. And Professor David Rhodes, who many of you may know from Lutheran School of Theology, Chicago, he's been a voice for creation care throughout the existence of the seminary. He and Keith Mundy, whose name comes up periodically when we're talking about involvement in LRC, they were some of the people who were involved in those conversations. While there was enthusiasm about trying to replicate this in other synods or trying to do something nationally, we ran into two fundamental problems. One, nobody could figure out where we would get the kind of resources that would allow for such a program to be replicated in many places across the country. And secondly, we didn't have the wherewithal to staff the review of grant applications. I think David was hoping that our Chicago Synod Committee would just take that on. And we're going, well, we barely have enough time to do the stuff we're doing in the Synod. So that's the story of our revolving loan fund. We present on it almost every year at our Synod convention. We always have a display table where we're collecting names and contact information from interested congregations. In fact, I've got one, that list sitting right in front of me here, and we had eight different congregations stop by our table to say they were interested.
Hmm.
Now we need to periodically send them reminder messages. Are you really interested? And if so, let's get the process started. One thing that I'll mention that's pretty time critical. Many of you know that the very lucrative, the last few years of the Biden administration were the golden years of the renewable energy incentives, and the one big beautiful bill that just passed is full of disincentives or canceling incentives. So the 30% capital credit that one can get from the IRS, even if you're a nonprofit that doesn't pay taxes, that's going to go away at the end of the calendar year. So, and certainly that was a key element of the solar project at Grace Lutheran in Libertyville.
And I see that Lisa has a question, and I just want to just
Let me
insert
scroll
myself
through.
too
Yeah.
also quickly with because you just mentioned it didn't seem like it was able to scale up to the national level. Do you believe that do you believe that other synods can replicate what you've done
For sure. Yeah, you'd need some expertise on your committee so that you can review energy audits and have some faith that the numbers are going to be the basis for a sound loan. We also have to find out from congregations just how viable the congregation is. We've had a couple of the projects we did early on are at buildings that are no longer Lutheran churches. Now, if that building is still being used, those kilowatt hours are still being saved. But we were created in part to help congregations spend less of their resources on utility bills and more of their resources on ministry. Initially, we thought we would have as our principal client base smaller, struggling urban congregations. But what we found was most of the interest was in larger suburban congregations where there was more hands-on interest in the environment as an issue. And so we've got a mix of suburban and urban congregations. And I said some of them, they all paid off their loans, but some of them are no longer Lutheran churches.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the deal necessarily here.
Was not part of our calculus, but it told us that we needed to make sure and check with the Synod office just how viable is this congregation before we enter into a loan agreement that's 3 to 5 years in duration.
Right. Good point. Lisa, we see, well, we don't see you. We see your yellow hand. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
We see you, Lisa? Hello, Lisa. Oh. I think you're unmuted, Lisa.
Does anyone else have any questions while we're trying to connect to Lisa's question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, now we can.
Yeah, I'm having some connection issues today. So I just wanted to correct a statement. You'll forgive me, Ken. The deadline for this year is for residential properties. For commercial properties, it's 2027. And I will give out the link to those details. Yeah, if you want to put solar on your house, you got to do it this year. But if you're doing it for your church or other commercial property, I believe it's 2027.
Well, thanks for that correction.
I'll dig up the links.
Now that you mention it, I did hear that on a call the other day, and I didn't remember it correctly.
Well,
Yeah, and
what
I
I
have links on, with information on both of those that I'll post. It's in
Thank
my
you.
latest newsletter for our Synod. I just have to go dig them up.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you. And I appreciate too what you're bringing up, the idea that this, unfortunately, the subsidies, offer opportunities, those might be moving targets, but also understanding that there is so much that can be done that doesn't have to be literally the icing on the cake with solar. That might not be the way to go, that there are all the spectrum, I think is really important to recognize. And Justin, it seems like that's what you help highlight for congregations, but also entire regions. I think that's really important. So if you do want to, I realize that there's a question there from Gabrielle. Gabrielle just got on in enough time to ask a question and then she left
Well,
again, but I guess we can honor it.
Gabrielle in a nutshell. She's
Yeah,
always
right.
ready to jump in at a moment's notice.
Right.
Go
Can you
ahead.
see that, Justin?
Yeah, and actually, I shared with you. I don't know if you can pull it up, and I emailed you
Good.
two things. One was the one pager I was talking about earlier, and then I also have because we come across this a lot where we get a phone call from somebody or we get an inquiry, and they're like, "I want an energy audit," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, great. Okay, what are you trying to do with your energy audit?" And they're like, I don't know. Somebody in our congregation, somebody that I know, somebody somewhere told me I needed an energy audit, or I should start with an energy audit, or the utility company told me I need to start with an energy audit, but I don't even really know what that is.
Mhm.
Well, and the other email that I sent you has it's just a simple 2-page Word document that we
Mm.
created. That's kind of in the standard commercial terms, a request for proposal, um, which is generally where you go out and say, "Hey, I know what I want. I need you, vendor one, vendor two, contractor one, contractor two. Here, give me your proposal for this." But again, if you don't know what an energy audit is, or you don't know what you're trying to accomplish,
Mhm.
or you're just simply trying to save money, or hey, we're trying to, kind of like the Northeast Synod here in Ohio, they were simply trying to figure out, where do we start? We've been doing some stuff. Is it
Mhm.
making a difference? What do we have to do to keep going farther? And I think that's one of the things that sometimes gets folks a little bit downtrodden once we present the level 2 report where we've done a lot of details. Is they've already done some of the stuff, kind of some of the things that Ken highlighted. Lighting can be a low hanging fruit, a simple
Yeah.
thing. There's also things that when you look at the congregation and who are the volunteers of expertise, um, a lot of times there are small projects that you don't necessarily have to be a certified electrician to rewire a light fixture, as long as you have the capability and capacity.
That's a great point, Justin. Most of the projects we've done with our Synod Loan Fund in Metro Chicago have been sweat equity installations. And the committee helps out as well as people within the congregation who have some basic understanding of how to install a fixture.
Yeah.
And one other point I'll make, and you were hinting at it, you know, because so many environmental activists are very eager to see a transition to renewable energy. Often we will hear from congregations who say, we want to go solar. And the first question we will ask them is, how efficient is your building? Because the energy you don't use is even more beneficial to the environment than the energy you produce from a renewable. Um, and so we encourage congregations, before you start looking at geothermal heat pumps or solar panels on the roof, make sure your building is energy efficient. And you know, periodically congregations have to replace their HVAC anyway. So if they're going to uh, make a major investment, make sure that that investment is state of the art to the extent they can afford it. You mentioned the need for weather stripping and other kinds of insulation steps so that you're using your energy wisely. Are your appliances Energy Star? Most churches have kitchens and office equipment. Those can be big sources of energy usage if, and particularly if they're not very efficient. So
And
those are some of the things we would want an auditor to look at, even if the Synod's loan fund might not be able to participate in all of those retrofit expenses.
Well, I think two things that come to mind along the line of appliances is about number one, just having people be curious about what's happening. We have a congregation in Southern Ohio, probably 8, 9 years ago, where the pastor was fairly new. It was actually an Episcopal congregation. My business partner knew the pastor. He was new there, but they had a refrigerator with a chain, like a logging chain. Like this sucker was not going anywhere. Whatever was trapped in that refrigerator was not going anywhere with a padlock on it. And he asked around the congregation. It was a small congregation, like 20 people. Nobody knew why the chain was there. Nobody could remember ever getting in it. They opened that thing up, and this is one of those, if you can imagine the 1950s, 1960s Harvest Gold, International Harvester green, like teal refrigerator, upright refrigerators. They finally, after a couple weeks, said, okay, nobody knows. They cut it with bolt cutters, opened it up. It was a 6-foot ice cube. We did the calculation. They were spending like $200 a year. Now, because of thermal mass, once the sucker got cold, it was going to stay cold until somebody opened up and unleashed the atmosphere on it. But they were spending like $200 a year just to keep this refrigerator chain shut, and just getting people to be inquisitive. And the other thing that I think about in terms of that is, the old saying of one man's trash is another man's treasure does not necessarily apply to houses of worship, because I always ask folks, great, somebody wants to donate their 1960s window air conditioner. Are they also going to donate the $50 or $100 or $200 a year that it's going to cost to power that? No, they're probably not going to do that. Okay, well, then that doesn't mean you have to receive that gift. And there's probably a good HVAC contractor that can recycle the refrigerant and recycle the metal on that, and let's put it where it needs to be, rightfully in a reclaimed area.
Just as we're coming to the end of our hour, were there any very specific questions you have for any of our amazing, experienced folks from different perspectives? And I will collect everything that's in the chat here. Again, well, I say I, but now Gabrielle also will help collect all of these materials. Any particular questions? Or yes, Lisa. Can't hear you yet. Let's see your hand. Lisa, maybe chat? Lisa? Yeah, we still can't hear you.
While Lisa's getting unmuted, I just wanted to acknowledge she put a link in there about the PACE financing program. That's a really good program. We've done a couple dozen of those projects here in Ohio, and about 35 or 40 states have that program. The interesting thing, and the thing that we've started the conversation about in the last, since at least January 20th, is that's a program that is adopted locally. So in almost no case is it subject to any type of federal chaos or recoil. That the programs are adopted. Some of the states manage their whole program. In Ohio, all 88 counties have to individually adopt in, and the municipalities that the organizations reside in have to adopt in. So it really is a local program, and it's a really good program for financing.
Excellent. Okay. And just going back to Susan asked the question, how are the IRS energy credits paid if the church doesn't pay taxes?
Because it's not an energy credit, it's an actual grant.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be up to 30% of the capital cost of renewable energy installation.
Mm-hmm. One of the analogies that I use is the term direct pay is the IRS tool that's used to be able to pay that out, even though the church doesn't pay in taxes. It's almost analogous to like a low income person who generates a certain, has a certain amount of income and pays taxes, but they might get a head of household earned income credit where they actually get a tax refund beyond what they paid into the tax system. It's kind of almost that same tool. It's the church isn't paying taxes in, but the IRS will cut a check.
Refundable credit. That's a
as
good way to put it.
credit.
And then Lisa had written, just for the folks at home maybe watching this, PACE requires that the cost savings from the project be net cash flow positive from day one. So you don't treat energy and water saving projects as expenses, but as investments. That is a great thing that I know Interfaith Power and Light had always really highlighted, just the idea too of anything you're doing as a cost to immediately think, at least make a blank line on your future benefits, your future income to be those savings, just helps change the mindset and to open up everybody's minds too, to that it doesn't need to be solar or something really flashy and big. My church is very small and we got excited about solar and then found out quickly we just weren't big enough to make it worthwhile. But we're hosting I just put a Facebook post in here. We're hosting activities at our church so that the whole community can think about how to make their, personal home that much more efficient. So again, put on your evangelism hat, maybe a little bit, if I can use that word, and think about how you can have your church be part of the community conversation, or better yet, have the community come into the church and be part of the conversation. That both and. I really appreciate the expertise in this room, but sometimes it can be overwhelming. And what I really like about everybody's take here is that for a few nuggets of real gems here, Marilyn started off with a very important word, patience, right? Really, that this is a long haul and to be patient. And what I kind of heard is like, move like water. Like when you can't get one thing here, just shift and find a way there. What I also heard is that it's very specific to where you are on the planet, but also where you are as a congregation, right? As to your evolution. I mean, the idea that churches, their membership might be shrinking, that doesn't mean that the church building doesn't need to be used. Other people can use it. And that isn't going to show up in any particular calculation per se, because suddenly you're using more energy, but hey, there are more people in the building and it's being used more. It's, really hard to quantify that. Then the other thing that I just wanted to highlight that Ken mentioned, if there's no champion, it doesn't happen. You were really clear on that. And I want you all to know that you don't have to know everything to be the champion. Just know where to find it or who to acknowledge. Justin mentioned like making sure to go through and make sure you affirm people's good work as well, I think is really important. But yeah, there are lots of different ways. There's so many ways we're messing up the planet. There have to be a lot of ways we can fix it too, and our relationship with it. So I thank you all very much. And I especially thank Marilyn because ahead of time, she said yes to being able to pray us out. Thank you, Marilyn.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you entrust us with so many gifts. Help us to tend and nurture them all the gifts of creation, our fellow creatures, the habitats on which we all depend, the relationships that help us grow and learn together as your beloved community. Thank you for this day, for this time together. Thank you for these people and their passions. And bless our work so that our work always brings glory to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Have a lovely night. Enjoy the sun's warmth as much as you can, or the tree's shade, either one. Bye-bye.
Night.